I started off as a stuntman initially. Funnily
Nice.
enough, when I was very, very young, I was very heavily into gymnastics and martial arts, and I wanted to be in front of the camera. And early in the career, actually, I had an accident with my knees that kind of caused me to move away from that field and dive behind the screen, meaning taking care more of the technical side and the visual aspects of crazy concept that I had in my mind, that I see why I can achieve what, you know, the CEO of this company, the founder of this company has achieved. Why can I achieve it? Rather than having such huge budget films, micro budget films and low budget films became the main um, need for the industry, because they were low budget and they still sold a lot, but they sold to the streaming platforms rather than to theaters. This is one way for many of the film companies to stay afloat.
All right, everyone, welcome back to SalesBiz. I appreciate you all taking the time. Before we continue, folks, once again, everyone knows the drill. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Like this if you find any value out of this specific episode, and drop us some comments down below. Today, my guest is an entrepreneur from the UK. He is currently the CEO and founder of AMG Media, focusing on special effects, digital solutions, and many other avenues that I look forward to talking to him about. I'm super excited to meet him and get to know him. Mr. Poya Shohani. Poya, welcome.
Hi there. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your podcast. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you taking the time. Did I butcher your last name, by the way? Is it Shohani?
No, Shohani, you said it right the first time, which is great. Yeah.
Usually butcher that sometimes. Names in sales, as you know, are very important for me. It's great to meet you, though, Poya. Before we dive into your entrepreneurial background, let's just first off get started in your professional background. How did you come into media and digital arts and all that good stuff?
Sure. I mean, it's a funny story. I started off as a stuntman initially. Funnily
Nice.
enough, when I was very, very young, I was very heavily into gymnastics and martial arts, and I wanted to be in front of the camera. And early in the career, actually, I had an accident with my knees that kind of caused me to move away from that field and dive behind the screen, meaning taking care more of the technical side and the visual aspects of film. Um, I studied for, say, it's about 2 years, self-taught myself sort of visual effects with different tools. We had Vimeo, YouTube, and many other tools we had. I then took an additional course on top, which really didn't help too much. But it gave me some sort of a paperwork that allowed me to sort of get into the industry more. Um, so I started off as a sort of a junior visual effects artist, working in multiple studios in around UK. But at the same time, I had the idea of starting to put together a team. Even though I was a junior, I wanted to get involved with the team and us create a unit that we can perhaps take on more work from films. Initially started off on John Carter of Mars in at a studio called Cinesite, and started putting the team together at that point, where we worked on sort of I specialized in destruction and effects, which is creating natural phenomenon for films and so on. And with my Iranian background, it was quite an interesting decision to make, but it was all obviously digital work. From that film, the team slowly moved over onto working with Framestar on Gravity, which surprisingly at the time, I mean, our team was growing, but at the time we were working on a sci-fi that we had no clue or idea that it would win an Oscar. We thought it was just going to be
No way.
another great film. And us alongside Framestore, we won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects, which really pushed my team and my own careers, very much ahead. And we fell into 20 plus Hollywood feature films over the past 12 years that we've grown AMG from it.
What
Yeah,
film?
from
What film won the Oscar?
Gravity with
Oh, yeah.
yeah, with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. which was quite interesting because, as I said, we didn't expect it. I mean, visually it was incredibly impressive by the end of it, but the whole idea of a journey of an individual kind of alone in space, I was like, it'll grab some
Catch on.
attention, but I didn't think it'll go that far. But it was a great film to work on, great cast to meet. Um, After that, we started working heavily on various different films. We went to Bulgaria to work on Olympus Has Fallen with Gerald Butler and Morgan Freeman, which was another very, very interesting experience. Yeah. From there on, we started to fall. We came back to UK and we got onto Muppets 2, Into the Storm, Hercules with Dwayne Johnson. It became, our schedule started to become busier and busier. And we worked on X-Men Days of Future Past, which was again nominated for Best Visuals. We didn't win it, but we were nominated again, which was great. Um, Moving forward, we took the team, and by this point, AMG, we had under multiple different names at the time. AMG was one that we were beginning to sort of incorporate as sort of the head company. Me and my partner Hashem Al Shire, we opened a branch in the UAE at the time called Three Quarters, and that primarily focused on films and commercial production. And so we had at the time we had the UK branch, then we had the UAE branch, and then we moved over to Australia in 2016 to work on Deepwater Horizon, which again was nominated. We also worked on They First Killed My Father with Angelina Jolie, her first film for Netflix, which was again incredibly impressive. She's a very impressive woman to work with. And also Lego Batman, which we did in Sydney as well. At this time, we opened up another branch in the US. That was our R&D division. So that took care of new techniques that we were using for films, experimented with new technologies for visual effects and for educational platforms. And that sort of brings us towards 2019, where we began to get more into financing and production of films in the UK and the UAE. And then we wanted to take what we were creating there to the US market and begin sort of funding films in that region. But by that time, 2020 happened, COVID happened, which, as we will get into it, I'm sure, had huge impacts on the industry, on our company, and kind of the trajectory of where we are now. So that's kind of my background up until now. I know you've got questions you want to dive in, so I won't cover everything in one speech.
It's an amazing story, and I can't wait to talk more about these movies. Some of the movies you mentioned, especially the Olympus Has Fallen. My wife and I are a huge fan of that entire trilogy, actually.
Okay.
There's London Has Fallen after that. I think you're
from
the UK. Then Angel Has Fallen. Yeah, Gerard Butler and Morgan Freeman do a great job on that one. But let's go back. I'm actually curious to hear more about the stuntman.
Oh yeah.
First, you're clearly passionate about movies, but why did you start off in the dangerous part of it? Was that something always a passion of yours?
It was. I mean, I was heavily influenced when I was younger, heavily influenced by Jackie Chan. I mean, he was a huge idol for me. And funnily enough, I wanted to be like the Iranian Jackie Chan. Or when I grew up, I was training most of my youth. I spent a lot of time training gymnastics and martial arts to kind of get to that point.
Very nice.
But obviously, we started in Britain's Got Talent. We were doing many different shows. We started doing stunt work on John Carter, the last film of Harry Potter. And I dislocated my knee. I tore my ligaments during training, which was the reason I had to step away from all of that. It was a pretty serious injury. They told me if I continued doing what I did, that I may not be able to walk. But that was a very, very young career of mine. So it
Sorry to
took
hear
a
that.
lot to, yeah, it took a lot to um, shift, and I went through a quite dark phase after that. But
Yeah.
I think that those were the steps. Those were kind of my lessons that I learned, um, to take on hardship, kind of at a very young age. No matter what life threw at me, I kind of decided, I only get this one life. I want to achieve what I want to achieve, and it's not going to stop me.
I live by
Um,
those words daily, brother. I love how you said
yeah,
that. You have one life, one gift. Don't waste it. It's gonna throw stuff at you, but you got to do with it. Which you got to play the hand that you're dealt. Love it.
that's that. So yeah, that's a little bit of my stunting. So yeah,
No, that's great. I mean, it's a dangerous game. I know that for a fact. And Jackie Chan did all of his stunts. I think that's why you're so inspired by him, right? Him, Tom Cruise, I believe, some of the few actors that don't have any doubles. So no, I'm sorry to hear that you got hurt, but it seems like you were so passionate about your industry, you kind of stuck with it. So
yeah.
tell me how you go from, I know you mentioned it was a dark time, but how did you eventually pivot from the being out in the field to being behind the computer doing the effects? Was that your second passion or just something you picked up because of
Um,
the injury?
I was heavily influenced by the Toy Story when it first came out. I was, I think, 13, 14 years old, and I was heavily involved. I mean, I think I watched that over 100, 200 times at that point because I was just so fascinated by the 3D, and I wanted to somehow get involved in it. But obviously, the passion for martial arts and what I had for Jack Chan at the time was much bigger. So that was my first priority. But when my knee happened, with the injuries and so on, I decided it's now or never. I have to make this transition. Um,
Right.
and It took some time. I mean, initially I started off as a runner, so I was picking up coffee and cleaning tables for artists. Well, that was my way in. That was initially, I was like, I'll do anything it takes for me to get in there. If it means I start here, even though I had trained myself, I had studied, I had taken courses and so on, it didn't seem to
They
matter
all
to
have to
the
pay their
industry.
dues. Everyone had to
I
pay their
still had
dues
to
at
pay
some
my
point,
dues.
regardless
So
of who you are. And I
yeah,
think, living in California, I've met a few people in the industry,
yeah,
agents, a couple of actors, and it doesn't matter whether you have a master's at Georgetown or
no,
Harvard. I mean, they want those people, but hey, get your ass in that mailroom first
that's
and
exactly. Start at the
deliver the stuff.
bottom and work your way up.
Yep.
Um, that was, yeah. So it was frustrating, but at the same time, I knew it is what it is, and I have to push through it. But one thing I continued to do was I started to bug the head of departments every day. I was like, "Oh, hey, how's your day? I'm cleaning their desk," and I'll be, "So, what are you working on today? What's the film? What is happening? Are you using this technique? This technique?" So every day I kept, and after 2.5, 3 months, I think the head, the CEO and the managing director kind of had enough, and they said, "Okay, there's a position available. We're going to give you an option to jump in and see if you do well. And we're literally taking you out of the frying pan and throwing you into the fire.
Yes.
So don't let us down." And that was kind of the beginning of many things for me because I decided, this is my chance now, and I better dive in as hard as I can. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my
So your
crazy
level of
beginning
inquisition, basically, you inquiring all the time, asking a bunch of
all the
questions,
time.
they smelled the passion on you. I mean, what other leader wouldn't want to pick that up? So no, kudos to you, man.
Yeah.
Martial arts, by the way, what did you study?
I studied multiple things, but my main one was Taekwondo.
Kicker.
So
Love it.
yeah, yeah, I'm a kick. I was a kicker. So Taekwondo was my main. Um, I did Shaolin boxing a little bit and Kung Fu, but my main one was still Taekwondo, and then obviously the
Surprised that
gymnastics.
Van Damme was one of your idols with all of his spinning back
Oh
kicks and
yeah,
all that.
oh yeah, yeah. He hit him with the split kicks and all of that. So huge idols of them. But yeah, it was a interesting period of life
That's
for
what I grew up
sure.
watching. Van Damme. I love Jackie Chan. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, but Van
Rumble in
Damme
the
has its
Bronx.
own. Yeah.
Rumble in the Bronx was one of my favorite movies growing up.
Great film. Great film. Rumble in the Bronx. My God, such a big influence. Yeah, that was a fantastic film.
It
Fantastic
was
film.
it was also the first time I caught on that. Wait a minute, they're not speaking English. They're mom. There's a voiceover. They're Latin.
Why is their mouth moving
Yeah,
more than their?
why is he still moving, but the voice stopped talking? Anyway, um, no, love it, man. I think you definitely build a. You were following what you wanted to do as opposed to being told what to do. I think that's
Yeah.
why you're smiling, and I love that about you. So tell me a little bit about entrepreneurship. You know, you clearly had a level of passion. You were clearly inquisitive. You clearly put in the work. But what made you say, why don't I just become a special arts director or something, put in my hours and call it a day? Why go into managing teams?
I remember going back to the first time I felt that the entrepreneurship or owning my own company is something I wanted was when I was a runner and I had to go and clean the meeting room of this visual effects studio I was working in, and they had just finished a meeting with some director, and they basically it was a very nice meeting and had a couple of awards there, and I just felt to myself like I want these clients for myself. Why am I cleaning their desk when truly what I wanted was to have to be in these meetings and for them to know that this is my company that they're dealing with. It was quite a bit big of an ego, but it was
It's
the
fair.
initial spark of a dream for me to go, well, I'm gonna do it. I mean, it's gonna take time, but I'm young. I'll make all my mistakes now, and it's a bit, I suppose, fearless. Some people say crazy, but it was this crazy concept that I had in my mind that I see why I can achieve what you know the CEO of this the founder of this company has achieved. Why can I achieve it? And that began the inception of what AMG is today. Is bringing the groups together, working with groups, and with the many partners that we have globally now. But that was sort of the initial concept. I had very good mentors throughout my life, different stages of my life. I had one mentor, Louis Pages, at the very beginning. He was, in fact, the head of department who hired me and told the CEO to give me an opportunity to work with them. He took me in and he trained me and taught me and brought me into his business. And he started teaching me the sort of the ups and downs of business, the tricks and treats of business. And from there on, that kind of grew and grew and continued to grow. So that's that's where my entrepreneurship really began.
Did you take some sort of, you had great mentorship, but were you doing any other studies on the side, like going to classes or reading courses or YouTube videos? What else? Where did you pick up the?
I mean, all of the above, really. I started reading a lot more on great entrepreneurs, many books. I started reading books such, for instance, Ray Dalio, which I highly would recommend people to read. Is a book called Principle, which came out not too long ago. But again, that was a huge inspiration for many of the.
Huge fan of Vanguard, by the way.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
He's
I hear you.
he's great. And then other creatives, such as Pixar creatives, how they started, um, and Bill Gates, how he began. So I started reading about all these big people and the mistakes they made, how young they were, the things that they did right, the things that they did wrong. That taught me a lot about who I am and what I could possibly achieve and what others have achieved. And there's always humility in understanding their mistakes. And when they understand their mistakes and they talk about it, I think it helps entrepreneurs such as myself to be like, okay, people don't get it right all the time. And it's through trial and tribulations that they build what they have. So,
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's very inspiring. Sure, I appreciate it. Let's talk about the pandemic. You know, the
yeah.
studio's cleared. A lot of people
Mhm.
working from home. Things got bad, and that was not just the UK, not just the USA, but globally. How did it impact your specific
Yeah.
business and industry?
Business. Yeah. I mean, it was bad time purely because obviously at the time we had several feature films that we were going to begin shooting in the US. But obviously, insurances just said we're not insuring anyone. Production completely shut down. Um, During that time, we spent a lot of time working on our educational side. So we are currently building an educational platform for school children that are being studying at home now. So we, based on artificial intelligence mixed with visual effects that we have, and we're creating a platform currently for school children in the UK and around the world. That became our primary focus during 2020. While we waited for the industry to hopefully open up, we were very hopeful. We didn't know where the industry was going to go, but then 2021 had been an absolute blessing for us. As the pandemic slowed down a little bit, industry opened up. It allowed us and the investors to begin looking at scripts and begin looking at funding films in the US. And now currently we have about 6 feature film projects on our US branch that we are currently in development. So we're investing in them, we're building them, we're talking to agents, actors, and directors. So that I mean, right now we're kind of going back to where we were and even better because we opened up a new branch in Russia. One of the reasons we did this was after the pandemic, Hollywood required the same level of quality of work, but for half the price. Just price wise, generally in the industry was a bit on a shock. And we opened up our branch in Russia in order to mitigate that situation, to be able to deliver the same quality, but at the same time for much less cost. And at the same time, we started doing Russian productions, and now we have US productions going. We're looking at some UK productions. All at the same time, we've built multiple subsidiaries to be handling the sort of different aspects. So we have AMG Marketing that we again opened up during the pandemic, and we did that primarily to help market all the new products that we're putting out there, new services and so on, as well as a completely new arm to take on digital marketing, which became huge during pandemic. We were so it was very tough, but we continued to stay on top. We continued to innovate. We continued to push the team further than before. In fact, I think we saw the pandemic as a point where if everything is quiet now, this is a time to build on top of what you already have. As difficult as it is, it helped obviously where we are now. It massively helped preparing there and where we are now. So that's a little bit about
I appreciate it. And where did you see the biggest pivot in the industry? What have you seen that's completely revolutionized the game that you've been playing for decades, basically?
Yeah. So the pivotal point for the industry itself, obviously the streaming platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, when the theaters shut down, the game changed. So it changed to, rather than having such huge budget films, micro budget films and low budget films became the main need for the industry because they were low budget and they still sold a lot, but they sold to the streaming platforms rather than to theaters. This is one way for many of the film companies to stay afloat, especially even now. You see a lot of low budget films that are released purely because this allows a continuous stream of revenue to come into the companies while we hopefully wait for the theaters to open up a little bit more and more. Allows more revenue to be generated or go back to normal times.
It's kind of crazy though. Like I'm watching these Netflix. Like I just saw a movie called Red Notice with The Rock, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, right. Like 3 A-list actors. Clearly, that was not a low budget film, man.
No.
That was like hundreds of million. I don't know how many millions, but that was definitely not micro budget. Do you see that that's kind of pivoting away still? Because that seemed like a movie I'd pay $40 for my wife and I to go to AMC theater.
Absolutely. I mean, what happened also was, so streamers we had out, but what they also did is with the release of Irishman, where he released it on the cinemas and on Netflix. That allowed two ways of generating revenue, whichever way the people wanted to really go. Now, how that affects after COVID, I think right now, obviously cinemas are opening up more. I know with Dune or No Time to Die and Shang-Chi, they generated, I think, close to $100 million on their opening weekend, but that was almost the first of its kind after COVID to begin generating that much. Um, so the industry is opening, but it's not quite there yet. Big budget films are obviously still in the need, but if you look at the ratio of how many big films are released compared to how many smaller films are released, the ratio is much higher on the smaller releases.
That's fair.
Um,
Do you feel
so
like
yeah,
theaters are dying?
I had that. I thought about it, but now I think they're opening up more. But I think they're going to change. They're going to have to adapt themselves to the new way the industry is working. I think the pandemic is going to be here with us to stay for a while. I mean, it's going to go ups and downs, but people will still love to go to theaters. I'd like to still love to go to theaters. I think the need is still there. It's just about how you mitigate the risks for consumers. Now, in the UK, we've had a massive growth in open air cinemas. So I don't know how it's like in um, LA right now, but here is a big boost of that. So that may become the norm um, while we move forward. So it's interesting to see where we're going to be next year as the pandemic hopefully falls a little bit lower and the industry breathes a lot more. Because we surely have a couple of big budget movies that we'd love to finish making, but we're waiting for the industry to pick itself up a little bit more before we begin releasing those. So
last question for you, Poya. And once again, I appreciate all the feedback and your experience around this industry, but I have to ask, who's your favorite actor and who would you want to work with before you call it quits on the
no,
stage?
that's a great question. There are many talented individuals. I think one of my favorites currently is Ryan Reynolds and Dwayne Johnson. I love these two. These two, they're just.
It's funny. I mentioned Red Notice, and they're both.
And I was just like, it's because they have so much charisma, and I think they bring so much charisma to the set, to the films that they work on, and great individuals just to work with. I always hear great things from them. I always hear great things from on set. How well they work with the team. So I'm very excited. I'm sure we have a couple of scripts that are being prepared right now for them. So I'm hoping in the future, to get a chance to work with them. It'll be great.
Amazing. Well, Poya, it's been a pleasure meeting you, man. Love the fact that you were very tenacious. You pivoted from a terrible scenario of getting injured in your ideal world, but you ended up succeeding not just on a personal level, but on having your own company and working with so many amazing names. The Schwarzeneggers of the world you mentioned, Sandra Bullock, George Clooney. I mean, there's a lot of here. So appreciate you joining. And please stay in touch.
Mike. Thank you so much for this. It's been a joy. Absolutely a joy speaking to you.
Absolutely. Don't jump off though. Wanted to
no.
Follow after. Appreciate it, Poya. Thanks so much.